Buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning, everybody. The sitting is open. First item on our agenda is the report by Ms. Vaidere and Mr. Niinistö, phasing out Russian natural gas imports and improving monitoring of potential energy dependencies. We'll start the debate with the rapporteurs, starting with Ms. Vaidere.
Dear colleagues, for the first time in European history, the European Union is going to end imports of Russian energy. It's a real turning point in European energy policy. Phasing out of Russian gas is a great achievement for the European Union, a truly historical step. I would like to sincerely thank Commissioner Jorgensen for his initiative and determination, the Danish presidency for engagement, and of course my co-rapporteur, Mr. Niinistö, with whom we had an excellent cooperation, for his hard work, and the great team of the shadow rapporteurs, whose constructive support made this result possible. The European Parliament put forward a strong and legally sound position. But not all member states were ready to move with the same level of ambition. The Parliament insisted, and we succeeded, that Europe must end its dependency on Russian gas as soon as possible. We delivered earlier phase-out deadlines for Russian gas than the Commission originally proposed. The Council resisted, but the Parliament stood firm. We also secured a special provision on harmonised penalties. Without enforceable penalties, no phase-out would be credible, and we tightened safeguards to prevent a circumvention. Russian gas must not return to Europe also through illegal ways. At the same time, we made it simple for trusted partner countries to import gas into the Union. They must not face bureaucratic burdens. It will pave the way for friendly countries to supply Europe with necessary gas. After strong pressure from this House, the Commission has now made a clear political commitment to present a similar legislative proposal on phasing out Russian oil. Also, oil revenues fund the Kremlin's war machine, and both oil and gas imports must be stopped. Colleagues, we must speak honestly. Russia has never been a reliable partner. It manipulated gas flows to weaken governments and destabilise markets, most dramatically before invading Ukraine. Energy and aggression in this case are intertwined. No one should claim business is business when energy is used as a weapon. The good news is Europe has alternatives. Over the past 2 years, firstly, the EU gas demand has been falling. Secondly, our gas supply has become far more diversified. And thirdly, the LNG supplies are rapidly increasing. The argument that we cannot replace Russian gas is not true. We can, and we already have. Colleagues, this regulation is not just an energy or trade file. It's a political, economic and moral decision. Since the full-scale war began, the EU has paid over 216 billion euros for Russian fossil energy. We still pay around 40 million euros every day, and every euro continues to fund the killings in Ukraine. Strikingly, Europe has paid more to Russia than we have collectively given to Ukraine in support. Tomorrow, when we vote, the Parliament has to send a historical message. Russian gas, never again. Thank you.
Grazie onorevole.
Thank you very much. Mr. Niinistö.
Madam President, for Russia, export of fossil fuels has never been about trade. It has been about manipulation, extortion and control. And today we are discussing a historic achievement and outcome in the trilogues. The EU is taking giant steps towards a new era free of Russian gas and oil. Never again dependency on Russia on fossil fuels. And Russia can never again use fossil fuels exports as a weapon against Europe. The path to this day has been long and it has been difficult, but we have to remember it's a historic outcome that we are here. The EU has never banned a trade on such commodities with any country before. So this goes beyond what is happening currently in Ukraine. We are helping Ukraine in the sense that we are stopping funding the Russian war machine, but we are also looking beyond that. We are making sure that Russia cannot use export of fossil fuels to Europe to divide ourselves. It has also been about control and trying to make Europe weaker, trying to divide and rule us. So therefore it is important that we take a broader step with this trilogue outcome towards energy independence. And I think it's important that the Parliament's position on this file were well reflected in the outcome. So the Parliament wanted that not just export ban or import ban of Russian fossil gas is to be put in place, but we are also getting a statement from the Commission that they will propose a similar ban on Russian fossil oil imports. And beyond that, Member States need to do a diversification plan which needs to be in line with our energy commitments and targets as well. This means that we should look also beyond gas. We have to import LNG from other countries in the short term, and we have partners that we can do that with, but we should not bind ourselves to long-term LNG imports from any country. We should bind ourselves to long-term independence in energy by investing heavily in renewable energy, energy efficiency and other clean sources. And this is the big chance for Europe here. We can look strategically beyond dependency on any external country, and we can look at building European competitiveness, address climate change and improve our security at the same time. So I think it's important that the Commission continues with this spirit in mind when they go into implementation of this ban. A few more words on the actual concrete outcome of the trilogues. I have to say, I think the outcome is something that the Parliament has been pushing for a number of years. Since the start of the Russian full-scale aggression and war in Ukraine in the spring 2022, the European Parliament has been pushing for such a ban. Now we have achieved it very clearly and also with a faster timeline than the Commission's original proposal. So LNG gas will be, even the long-term contract, will be banned by the end of 2026, and there is a ban for pipeline gas by the 30th of September 2027. Also, the Parliament achieved a very strong maximum penalties to be enforced by Member States against operators for infringement of the regulation. I think this is vital because this regulation is actually stronger than the sanctions regime, which means that there is no circumvention and no efforts by Russian actors that can circumvent the regulation and bring income from Russia through third countries. This is vital that this is implemented well. Also, further, I think one of the reasons why this achievement is so strong is that this is a timely moment to do this change. We need this change happening now when there is a political freedom from the Member States and from the Parliament to achieve this. And I don't think we would be here today without a broad agreement between the different parties and the shadow rapporteurs in both in the committee and ITRE committee in the negotiations. So this is an achievement by a vast majority of the Parliament. I congratulate you all for that. Thank you.
Grazie onorevole.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Jørgensen, you have the floor on behalf of the Commission.
President, thank you. So, this House makes many important decisions, but I still do think it's rare that you make one where we know for a fact that it'll be noticed in Moscow, it'll be noticed in Washington, it'll be noticed all over the world. Probably with smiles most places, definitely not with smiles in Moscow. This is important. This is taking away real money from the war chest of Putin. This is important because we're showing that when we stand together in Europe, when we cannot be divided, we cannot be blackmailed. You cannot weaponize energy against us, or rather you can, but we will have an answer. So, the decision that we've made now to ban the import of Russian gas is a historic one. And I think probably what makes me most proud is the fact that this is not something that we do temporarily. This is not something that we will take up to revision in 6 months, and then if it's comfortable for domestic economic reasons, we might start importing gas again, even if there's a peace. No. This is a no, and it's a never again. Not a single molecule. We cannot repeat the mistakes of the past. Later, in the start of next year, the Commission will also put forward a proposal to end the last imports of oil. This is also important, and later again we will also put forward a proposal to end nuclear fuel. Although looking at the economic side, obviously this decision today is so much more important. Still, we need to be completely rid of Russian energy in Europe. So, once again, I want to thank the rapporteurs, the shadow rapporteurs. Actually, I would say a vast majority of this Parliament has been extremely supportive, and I honestly think that the outcome that we have after negotiations is better than the proposal that I put forward. So it's not rare, but that is certainly the case also here. So thank you so much for that.
Grazie, Commissario.
Thank you very much. Commissioner, now on behalf of the Committee on Internal Market and Consumer Protection, Mr. Saudargas.
Thank you, President. Dear Commissioner, dear colleagues, this file is utmost important as well as urgent. My sincere thanks to rapporteurs, Ms. Vaidere and Mr. Niinistö, and the whole team. They were very strong and committed. However, I'm sorry, but I slightly lacked the adequate ambition from the Council and the Commission. To fight back the most brutal regime of the century, you must be united, you must be courageous. The compromise bans imports of Russian pipeline gas and LNG 6 weeks after the regulation enters into force, with a transition period allowing existing contracts to run until short-term LNG and pipeline gas contracts are phased out by April and June next year, respectively. However, the compromise was achieved largely because Parliament agreed to make concessions, especially dropping the ambition to ban oil as well. The Commission promised to present a legislative proposal at the beginning of next year. So the responsibility now lies with the Commission to keep the commitment to finally rescue Europe from Russian fossil fuels. We will be waiting. Thank you.
Grazie, iniziamo.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the debate on behalf of the EPP, Ms. Wechsler.
Sehr geehrte Frau
Madam President, Commissioner, dear colleagues, a few winters ago, millions of Europeans were freezing in their houses and were paying extortionate electricity bills, energy bills. My students were in freezing lecture halls. Businesses were switching off the lights, not for climate protection reasons, but out of fear. And evening after evening, we kept asking ourselves, will there be enough gas? This crisis was due to dependence on Russian energy. And while we were trembling Ukrainian cities were burning, and they are still burning today. And every time that gas goes through our pipelines, money flows into Putin's war chest. We must not allow this to continue. The exit from Russian gas is not a technical measure. It's a decision in favour of European sovereignty, security, and solidarity with Ukraine. Yes, of course we have to protect our businesses and industries and citizens, and therefore we have to close loopholes, but without choking Europe, strangling Europe with bureaucracy. We have to provide legal certainty and monitoring, and our message is clear. Europe will no longer be blackmailed. Europe will not finance a war of aggression, and Europe is learning the lessons of its history and is making history in this House, and that is absolutely what we should be doing.
Grazie onorevole.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pellerin-Carlin for the S&D Group. 2021. Inflation was the scourge of Europe. People were suffering. Companies were worrying. Millions of Europeans were facing an abyss. This inflation was no accident. It was the direct result of political choices, choices that made Europe dependent on Putin's gas before he launched his tanks on Kyiv. So we are now saying, never again. Never again will we be dependent on Russian gas. Never will we finance Putin's wars. But let's not be naive. Shale gas bought from the US is also increasing our risks. So our sole choice is the choice of European sovereignty. We call on member states to continue their investments in energy efficiency and renewable energies, and finally start an energy policy which provides us with sovereignty. It's not an option. It is the foundation of our liberty itself.
Grazie. Prego, onorevole Maria.
Mr. Mariani is next.
Avec la sortie du gaz.
Without Russian gas, Europe is showing how blinkered it is. Sanctions as a political instrument, conditional, reversible, adaptable, is one thing. This regulation is devastating because in legal terms it is putting a decision in place without any review clause, without any possibility for Europe to adapt, and that is true even if the geopolitical situation changes and a peace agreement is concluded with Russia. It's historic, it is dramatic. We've never broken our energy links with the Great East at any point in history, even at the historical low points. It's a strategic lever for peace and for Europe. Freezing Russian assets for an indefinite period is putting Brussels into a position of contempt of history and of its own continent. The classic sanctions type regime, the spirit and letter of the treaty have not been respected. There is not the standard legal basis, and there are no safeguards for individuals and companies. We now become dependent on USNLG. We are sacrificing our competitiveness and doing away with a diplomatic leader for the future. We're approaching signature of a peace agreement. This irreversible decision is placing Europe in a terrible political impasse. What you're doing now is a legal coup, which is ongoing against people and nations, circumventing the treaties.
Mr. Kols for the ECR Group now.
Thank you. I will speak in Latvian.
Dear colleagues, after tough negotiations in the trilogues, we finally have an agreement that excludes Russian gas from the European energy space. Yes, it is not a perfect agreement. We in the European Parliament would like to have a faster and tougher phasing out, preferably already yesterday, but this is an essential, practical and real result. The European Parliament was stronger in its position than the Commission and the Council, and this is reflected in the final text. This regulation does what the sanctioning mechanism cannot do. There is no longer a need to cross swords every 6 months over extensions, no need to live in the shadows of political fluctuations. Russian gas flows into the European Union are blocked by a stable permanent legal framework. At the same time, this agreement is also ambitious. Waiver deadlines have been cut short and the ban's entry into force 3 months sooner than originally planned, achieved by the Parliament, is measured in billions of euros that won't go to the Kremlin budget. The next step is clear. The Commission's pledge to come up with a proposal to ban Russian oil and oil products by 2026. And it has to be followed by also abandoning Russian nuclear fuel. It is all within one process, and we will have a lot of work ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Karvashova. For Renew.
Colleagues, tomorrow there is a historic vote to take. The vast majority among us do support what today's debate will demonstrate. It was clear to see how in the final negotiations we were really united among us here representing the Parliament. We've decided in the EU we want to cut off on our dependency on Russian gas. It's in stark contrast to how the Slovak government is seeing things. Also, their representatives here in Strasbourg or Brussels, they are scaremongering, they're spreading fear that it's impossible to live without the Russian gas, but it's only them who can't live without the Russian gas. They claim that the gas from Russia is cheap, but they want to subsidize 90% of households from our national budget. The companies are paying highest prices among the EU member states. They say that Slovakia has no other options, but more than 70% of our gas is imported from other countries than Russia. So we will either continue scaremongering, spreading fear, fighting for Russian interest and being in a conflict with EU, or we will look into the future. Slovakia can only be successful in this new geopolitical reality if we really pursue Slovak interests. Anything else is a betrayal.
Thank you very much, Ms. Reinke, for the Greens.
Thank you.
Paldies. Kolēģi, šis kontinents būs brīvs tikai tad, kad mēs nebūsim atkarīgi no fosilajām degvielām un oligarhiem. Šis ir Eiropas neatkarības brīdis, un tas solis, ko mēs šobrīd spēram, ir ārkārtīgi svarīgs. Vēlos pateikties referentiem, īpaši viņiem, bet arī visiem pārējiem, kas ir ieguldījuši smagu darbu, lai tas tā notiktu, jo beidzot mēs izbeidzam savu sāpīgo dekādēm ilgo un kaitējošo atkarību no Krievijas gāzes importa. Mums tas būtu bijis jādara daudz agrāk, kolēģi. Mums nekad nevajadzēja būvēt Nord Stream 2.
We will not become free in Europe by simply replacing Russian gas imports by another dependency on, for example, imports from the US. Only massive investments into renewable energy and energy efficiency will make that happen. More wind, more sun, more peace, more freedom, and more European sovereignty. That's what we need, and that's what we should work for. Thank you very much.
Grazie onorevole, prego onorevole.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yadin, for the Left Group. The EU's dependency on other countries has allowed us to be blackmailed. Putin's using gas as a weapon to split governments, to push up energy prices, and this is a strategic mistake that we're trying to correct now. Phasing out imports of Russian gas is an important decision on the basis of defence policy, and I'm pleased that I've been involved in the negotiations, because when we stop the import of Russian gas, we also throttle an important income for Putin's Putin's war machine. But that's not enough, just turning off the tap. The shadow fleet is also being used still, and that's threatening the environment, continuing financing his war activities. That's why the phase-out of Russian oil needs to be done quicker, that sanctions need to be sharper. An EU that lags and accepts loopholes is undermining its own credibility and its security. Genuine security is built through independence. The EU has to invest in robust and green energy production and has to establish price-setting mechanisms on the electricity market that doesn't hit those who have the least income. Renewable energies is not just good environmental policy, it's good defence policy as well. Breaking this dependence on Russian energy is taking back control over Europe's future. And this proposed legislation constitutes an important step towards a safer EU and a free and independent Ukraine.
Grazie onorevole.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Buchheit.
Thank you, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen, when we're going to get all emotional all over again in this House, it's not a sign that it's Christmas. It's a sign, if you're following at home, that people don't have strong arguments. You've said time and again that this is going to be a definitive phase out, a definitive end to the import of gas from Russia. Have you really thought this through? You're saying it's wonderful that Parliament has gone even further than the Commission and the Council wanted to, that they've been even more energetic and aggressive against Russia. What is happening today, ladies and gentlemen, is not action against Putin and Putin's war machine. This is an explicit declaration of war against Russia itself, against the Russian people. If you just think that there would be a regime change in Russia, what would you do then? What we are deciding now is permanent. You're breaking all the bridges that we might want to keep with Russia in future. You're militating against peace. I can understand if you don't want peace with Putin, but you're actually saying that you don't want peace with Russia forevermore, and I think that is scandalous.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warborn. Thank you, Madam President, Commissioner. On the 24th of February 2022, the world changed. Russia's illegal and heinous war of aggression against Ukraine didn't just threaten Ukraine, but the whole of Europe. So let us be crystal clear. Ukraine's security is Europe's security. So we've increased sanctions against Russia. We have increased provision of weapons to Ukraine. We've increased humanitarian support. We've increased financial support. And we are standing side by side with Ukraine since day one. But in all honesty, as long as we continue to import Russian gas, we are continuing to finance Putin's war machine. And that is untenable. That's not responsible and is not compatible with our support with Ukraine. To phase out Russian gas completely. Because for every penny that goes to the import of Russian gas is a penny that is going to finance the war on European territory. But now we are finishing that. Long live Ukraine, long live Europe.
Grazie onorevole, prego onorevole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Assis now.
Thank you very much. Commissioner, colleagues, for too long now, we were turning a blind eye to the geopolitical risks that were linked to our excessive energy dependency, or we were pretending to turn a blind eye to it. Now we're in a situation where Russia has been using energy to exert pressure. It's a dramatic situation for our security, economy, and for European citizens and businesses. Stopping Russian gas imports strengthens our economic autonomy and it strengthens our energy system. We need to improve existing infrastructure, cooperation between member states, interconnections, diversification of suppliers and of renewable energy sources. Our energy dependency is not limited to gas. In this Parliament, we have frequently said that we need to extend this to other forms of energy coming from Russia. So we're pleased to note that the Commission has committed to put forward an initial proposal on Russian oil next year. And you can certainly count on the European Parliament support for that. Thank you.
Prego, onorevole Stancanelli. Prego.
Mr. Stancanelli.
Thank
you, President. Ladies and gentlemen. The agreement on phasing out Russian gas being discussed here, we've heard several people saying that this is a historic victory, but this is really the triumph of hypocrisy at the cost of citizens. There are two critical aspects that have been lost sight of, and the Commission has lost sight of this as well. What about price? Importing LNG makes everything very expensive going through pipelines. It's not just the cost of the primary materials, it's liquefaction, transport by ship and regasification. We need to make sure that we have appropriate supply, and that supply chain becomes more and more expensive. And this is something that is passed straight on to the utilities bills of our citizens, and we're raising inflation for energy bills. The second problem is that gas is fungible, and that we know that through gas we are having to exploit third countries. Russian gas is going to come into the EU via, and we won't have any mastery over that. So we need agreements that are going to make us stronger, but these haven't been devised appropriately, and they're going to make us poorer in the end. We need to be more practical and pragmatic. This is a bill that's going to have to be footed by people and companies. Thank you. Ms. Szydło.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, one can say, finally, at last, 4 years later, we have got a decision that should have been taken a long time before. Most of the speakers who have spoken before me, also the Commissioner, have underlined this is a historic moment, and this is truly the solution that for now, but also for the future, is absolutely necessary. However, we have heard Mr. Commissioner say that this decision is going to be invariable. It's not going to change. But, ladies and gentlemen, the situation in politics is also highly dynamic, and we know very well that the principle of business as usual very often dictates the conditions in the political discussions and is more important than common sense and security when you consider various interests. So it seems that right now we should first and foremost focus on this decision that was taken not to be changed ever. We should watch for those rules to be binding also for oil, for crude oil. And remind yourselves, some time ago the decision to build Nord Stream 2 was taken. Now we're saying it was a historic error. Thank you.
Prego.
Mr. Kudler.
Colleagues, 15 billion euros. That is what we have paid collectively this year to Putin by buying his gas. 15 billion euros is 3 times the annual budget for Erasmus+. It's 2 years of Horizon Europe. 15 billion is a huge amount. And let's be clear, every euro spent on Russian gas is 1 more euro to pay for a murderous war in Ukraine. This has got to stop. Parliament fought for this, and we have achieved a complete and fast phase out from Russian gas by 2027. This shows what can be achieved when European institutions work together. We are now turning a historic page. We are putting an end to our dependence on Russia. But let's learn our lesson, Commissioner. Let's not replace one dependency by another. American LNG ought not to become our new Achilles heel. Let's remain masters of our own energy destiny.
Thank you very much, Mr. Søvndal.
Merci. I'll speak in Danish. Med denne historiske beslutning fortsætter.
With this historic decision, we are continuing our liberation from Russian tyranny. We need to move away from fossil fuels which are destroying the planet and financing Putin's war chest. So I'm particularly pleased with this agreement which has been reached. I believe that this agreement was only possible thanks to a good spirit of cooperation between the rapporteurs, Ms. Weider and Mr. Niinistö, and the Commission too. We now need to be very clear about what comes next. We're turning off the tap of tyranny to Putin, but that means we need to fund our own green energy sources a lot more so that European citizens are not facing a cost of energy crisis, so that we can be truly autonomous. Never again should we dependent on any regime in the West or the East. We need to liberate Europe and develop the technologies that will allow Europe to be truly independent. That will require courage. And that will also mean that we can't just substitute Russian gas with Trump oil. We need to ensure that we keep producing in Europe and we're not totally at the mercy of these geopolitical winds, so that we have global energy independence for the EU in such a way as to ensure that we're not continuing to fund Putin. We need to invest in the future, in our common hope.
Hver gang EU-lande køber russisk gas, olie eller...
Anytime an EU state buys Russian gas or oil, we are financing the unjust war of Putin. So we've actually provided more support to Russia's war chest than to Ukraine's, which is ridiculous. So it's all the more important that we put a stop to that and no longer buy Russian gas. I think, nevertheless, that there are three important questions we need to raise. First of all, why is this only happening now? More than 3 years too late. And secondly, how long are we going to still buy Russian oil and uranium? And thirdly, why are we still so slow in developing renewable energies to achieve a genuine independence of European energy? Maybe we wouldn't be dependent on Russia anymore, but dependent on other countries. And when push comes to shove, we know that they're also prepared to blackmail Europe and constitute a threat to Europe. We haven't achieved our goal yet, but we're making a step in the right direction.
Mr. Damasi.
Dear colleagues, we have now adopted 19 sanctions packages against Russia with all sorts of individual measures, but the leading economic research institutions all agree that we have not managed to really dent Russia's capacity to wage this war, because we are financing his war. He's managed to adjust to trade flows to China to make up for anything he may lose with Europe. And there is now a risk that we won't be able to heat our homes this winter, and we are replacing one dependence on Russia with another. We're going to be dependent on dirty fracking gas at a time where Donald Trump is imposing punitive tariffs on us. So this doesn't make sense. I think we need to bring Nord Stream back into operation. We need to focus all our efforts on a ceasefire, and that would help us all.
Mr. Popescu.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen,
Europe has paid for its energy with strategic vulnerability for too long. Today we make a clear historic decision. This vote is about Europe's independence and cutting the last structural ties to somebody who uses energy as a weapon against us. Gas was never a neutral commodity. It was always an instrument for political blackmail, pressure and coercion. We now have a clear text. No dependencies, no ambiguities, no circumvention. But independence must come along with solidarity. We know that member states have different levels of exposure and vulnerabilities. Coordination and not fragmentation is the path to go. We must be realistic. If we look at geography, we see that southeastern Europe is an essential link in Europe's energy system. Transit and the infrastructure in this region are critical, even if they are not mentioned explicitly in the final text. This must be a clear political priority. This vote is about our credibility and our capacity to act decisively when our independence is at play. I would like to raise the alarm in that now that we have here the Energy Commissioner here. I know he is a man of good faith. It's very good to have climate neutrality, but we need to make sure that we don't replace dependence on Russian gas with a dependence on other states from around the area. Even if the price may appear to be smaller, our freedom and independence has no price.
Onorevole Geiger, prego.
Mr. Geiger.
Ladies and gentlemen, Madam President, Commissioner, my thanks go first of all to those colleagues who negotiated this fine result, Ms. Federer, Mr. Niinistö. This is a fantastic result that has been achieved, and I congratulate you, of course, and also Commissioner Jönsson, who made a considerable contribution to this result as well. I think Mr. Niinistö made an important point. Russian gas imports are less about business, but more about control, and therefore the decision that the Parliament will take tomorrow is an important step in the direction of European independence and resilience. The next step must be the end of oil imports and, yes, the end of uranium imports from Russia. Those who pointed out that we need to avoid a new form of energy dependency, dependency on American LNG, is important as well, because this is also a question about control as well as business. And the next hike in prices will be Trump's responsibility. So in Europe, we should be aiming for independence of energy supply.
Onorevole Laszlo.
Mr. Laszlo.
Nem sikerült, mégis erőltetik.
It didn't work, yet you are still forcing it. Ursula von der Leyen and Joe Biden promised that sanctions would bring Russia to its knees, but Joe Biden is no longer in office. It would be time to hold Mrs. von der Leyen accountable as well. The biggest problem with energy sanctions is not that they didn't achieve their objectives. The biggest problem is that they cause greater damage to European economy than to Russia. According to the IMF, Hungarian economy would shrink by 4% if we had to purchase gas and oil from elsewhere. Household utility costs would triple, fuel prices would also increase. And meanwhile, in Brussels, you're preaching about solidarity, but Brussels solidarity somehow never seems to be about European citizens. You know full well that in Europe, people have to pay energy prices that are 3 to 4 times higher than in the US or in China. But you're still forcing sanctions. This will ruin families and the European industry as well. Stop this. If you're going to bypass the veto, then Ursula von der Leyen can prepare for another lawsuit. Thank you.
Onorevole Axinia.
Ca să aibă efect interzicerea importului.
If we want the ban on Russian gas to have an effect, we should have done it when the war started. The fact that we talk about this 4 years later shows that many member states are hypocrite because they continued to import Russian gas. 187 billion we gave to Ukraine, but we imported gas and oil of over 200 billion euros. Some states preferred to buy liquefied natural gas, for instance. Others imported oil. This fueled Putin's war machine and allowed them to deliver GNL to the rest of the world through proxies. Let me draw your attention to the fact that even the new regulation fails to settle the problem of importing from Turkey or Azerbaijan, but under a different label. Some even think of the Romanian gas from the Black Sea. However, our position is quite firm. The position of our party will use that gas to heat our own homes.
Karsbro.
President, Commission, colleagues, it's a disgrace that Europe has made Russia's war of aggression possible. As the Swedish Minister of Foreign Affairs explained, since the full-scale invasion, Europe has imported Russian oil and gas to an amount of 201 billion euros. If we add other imports, the number grows to 311 billion euros. That is 124 billion more than we have sent in support to Ukraine. The decision to stop Russian gas imports is important, but not enough. We have to stop every single euro going into Putin's war chest. It's outrageous that we are still buying steel from Russia. Last year, a volume as large as Sweden's entire annual steel production was imported to the EU. It's about damn time to stop doing business with Russia.
Grazie, onorevole.
Thank you. Mr. Sinkevicius.
Dear colleagues, let me start by first of all thanking the Commission for putting this brave proposal on the table. Let me thank our rapporteurs for a great work and also advisors. I know that they worked tirelessly and very hard to finalize this file. Today, Europe makes a choice about who we are and what we will no longer accept. Because for decades, our energy system was built on a dangerous illusion that dependence on Russian gas was somehow cheap, stable and harmless. And we see the truth. We see what's happening in Ukraine, that energy was used as leverage, as a pressure, as a weapon. And finally, we end it. By phasing out Russian natural gas, Europe is reclaiming its freedom. We are saying clearly that our homes, our industries and our future will never again be held hostage. Europe chose courage over comfort, and history will forever remember this vote.
Grazie, onorevole.
Thank you. Ms. Rod-Nevedalova.
Thank you very much, colleagues. This decision is really bad and really stupid for the European Union, and I believe that we should also listen a little more to what our citizens want and not what the citizens of Ukraine want. Cutting off Russian gas, which is close to us, which goes through a pipe which is much more ecological than the gas that goes in tankers from the US, is something really, really silly. We can't cut off from something that is really close to our territory. We are discussing how this is great for all of us. And I listened to you, Commissioner, when you presented this in the committee. You said that that not even a molecule of Russian gas should enter the territory of the EU. Well, I know this is your policy, and I don't believe it's correct, because the territory of the EU includes Slovakia, which needs gas and uses a lot of gas. By cutting off Russian gas, we are saying that the Russian war in Ukraine is ever going to end and that we are ever going to cooperate with Russia again. I know we have dependencies. Some countries support this because they are obtaining transit payments from us. But it's silly, it's It's bad, and we are not going to help either the competitiveness of the EU or our own companies because they need cheaper and better gas, which is coming from Russia in this case. So do not cut off Russian gas. Don't shoot our other food. Don't make silly decisions that we'll have to, just like in case of combustion engines, which we'll have to review in 5 years, and I promise you this will happen.
Thank you. Mr. Aaltola.
Arvoisa puheenjohtaja, katsomme
President, we are all looking to Donbass and the borders of Donbass. Of course, the real decisions are being taken elsewhere. There are people now trading over souls, and strategic autonomy needs to be bought and sold. We cannot imagine that we can turn the clock back. The Iron Curtain has fallen. It's a deep trench that needs to be overcome. We cannot go back because Europe has taken decisions that cannot be undone. Some people are asking when the sanctions will stop, but that is unimportant. We are trying to espouse principles of autonomy for our security in the future. We know that this is no longer temporary. Our dependency on Russia is now being made illegal. We have our backs against the wall. We cannot believe anymore that help will come from the other side of the pond. We have to ask ourselves, if we want a strong and independent Europe, then we have to take this decision.
Thank you, Mr. Benifei.
Nel giorno in cui
Here we are discussing a definitive stop to Russian gas, and on the same day the Meloni government is voting against using Russian assets to support Ukraine. That's a choice that will make Europeans pay for Russia's criminal aggression. We want to be free of energy dependency. We want to be free to make our own choices about gas. But Matteo Salvini in Italy is saying that Russian assets should be returned to the Kremlin. And I quote, otherwise this would be a violation of international law. How dare he say that so barefacedly? Rosario Dalla and others deserve our solidarity. I'm talking about people sentenced to 15 years in prison in Russia for calling Putin a criminal. The EU needs to be able to make its own choices. We have to be able to choose about our own future without anyone breathing down our necks. So we should go for this fearlessly.
Borchia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Borchia.
Grazie, ma è un dibattito.
Well, what a pathetic debate. I mean, there are moments of theatre here, but also a lot of memory loss. People appear to be struggling to recall how they had people on the board of Gazprom and so on within their political group. At any rate, now we're recognising that the EU got it wrong, got its priorities wrong, that its climate extremism was wrong, and put us in this difficult position in the international context. We're talking about European interests here. If you want energy independence from Moscow, it's fine by me. But how about bringing down prices, increasing domestic production of gas? Because otherwise there's no hope of achieving a reasonable situation for European citizens. It's not only about the Ukraine peace process. We need to be able to defend our own interests, starting with energy. Thank you very much, Mr. Iabs.
Thank you, Madam President, the Commissioner, the rapporteurs. Today marks an important and necessary step forward. The the European Union. Phasing out Russian gas is not only a response to Russian aggression and changing geopolitical reality, it is also a statement of our values and our priorities. By reducing our dependence on this external supplier, we strengthen our own security, resilience and unity. In the Parliament, we have chosen cooperation over coercion, sustainability over vulnerability and long-term stability over short-term convenience. It will take serious work to implement this regulation properly, but this transition is also an opportunity. It accelerates investment in renewable energy, energy efficiency and, what is more important, diversified supply routes. It creates jobs, drives innovation and moves us closer to climate neutrality. Most importantly, it ensures that Europe's energy future is shaped by democratic choices, not political pressure. Thank you very much.
Grazie onorevole, prego onorevole.
Thank you, Ms. Gregorova.
Dear colleagues, Commission, when my homeland reached independence on Russian fossil fuels, they still paid Putin for it, with the argument that it's cheaper. I was baffled by this. Phasing out Russian gas is not just energy policy. Europe is at war. This is a security decision. Russia will now lose almost €1 billion every month because of Parliament's negotiation. There is an immediate, tangible and measurable impact. The European Parliament shows it's not here just to vote on temporary sanctions that get renegotiated every 6 months. On banning Russian oil, we have not gone as far and fast as we could have. The Commission is committing to phasing out Russian oil in the near future. That is, however, too slow. At least we ended constant abuse of sanctions by certain member states. And that uncovers the true strength of the European Union. Together, we can do what no member state could achieve alone. It's never cheaper if it's paid by human lives, peace, international rule and democracy. Thank you.
Grazie onorevole, prego onorevole.
Thank you. Mr. Hansen.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I will be speaking in Danish. Jeg tror, det er på tide, at vi ser virkelighed.
About time too. We need to look reality in the face. There are two fundamental problems with Russian gas. One, it's Russian. Two, it's gas. So, if we say trade can help peace, I think it's a bit of a pipe dream. We have a ruthless adversary here, and we're not building bridges. We have created a weapon which has now been used against us. We have to do away with Putin's dream of Russia as a superpower. Unfortunately, however, there are some Europeans who block any initiative that we try to take to stop Putin's war machine. And I'm fed up with it. How can we continue holding out a hand to Putin while he's holding out his hand to take money from our budget? Mr. González Casares.
Madam President, when Russia began its war of aggression against Ukraine, about half of the gas consumed by the EU came from Russia. This was no coincidence. This is a weapon the Kremlin used with direct consequences on the European economy, for our businesses and for our citizens. And I think with this agreement, we are now taking a firm step in the direction of closing by 2027 a phase that we never should have allowed. We will be reducing our dependence on Russian fossil fuels. This is an ethical decision by the EU to ensure that not one more single euro will pay for Putin's war machine. This is a decision in favour of European security. For this reason, to think that we should replace this dependence by another is a mistake. I don't like these agreements to buy massive quantities of fossil fuels from elsewhere. I think we should invest in renewables, in European energy, produced in Europe. Commissioner, don't listen to these patriots, so-called patriots, who claim to defend their countries, but then they don't want our own energy. They want to continue dependence on other countries for fossil fuels. Don't listen to them. They don't have any solutions.
Thank you, Ms. Győri.
Colleagues, the European Union has turned itself inside out and become a prisoner of war psychosis. The President of the Commission and even the Secretary General of NATO openly aimed at making it impossible to import Russian natural gas into the EU. You are killing the secure and affordable energy supply of 2 member states to protect the perceived interest of a third country. I would like to quietly note that Hungary supplies 51% of Ukraine's electricity needs. What's more, you are doing this through legal trickery. You are presenting the ban as a trade policy tool, thereby circumventing unanimous decision-making. You are therefore trampling on the obligation of solidarity and loyal cooperation, as well as the rule of law. In other words, you are destroying the European Union. You are openly threatening those member states that refuse to fall into line, and they could suffer the same fate as Hungary, you are saying, even Belgium. In doing so, this is blackmailing. Please take note, you will not be able to bring Hungary to its knees with this. This is a very dangerous game that you are playing because you are going to destroy the European Union. Thank you.
Nikhil.
Thank you. Ms. Nikhil.
Thank you so much, President, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, this is the end of the Russian gas. Europe gave a Christmas gift to Putin, a gift he was not expecting, the end of our dependency on Russian gas. The first step was to say that it was a mistake and a threat. Now it's time to the second step, to become fully independent from this dictator. So we are saying clearly, we are stopping the imports of Russian gas and soon also of oil. And those who talk about the cost for common people and who say what the Kremlin says should stop and answer one question. How much is worth for them the life of their children, of their family? How much would they pay in order not to have to see Russian rockets turning their houses to dust? Because Ukrainians, they cannot choose. They pay this huge price every day with their deaths and with their fear. That's why I want to thank the rapporteurs, shadow rapporteurs, and especially Madame Vaidere for their work, because for the laws that we are accepting. And also I would like to ask the Commission to present another proposal concerning oil that will be a true step to achieve our independence. And let us remember that if we are on the side of freedom and democracy, we have to be consequent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Christian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be speaking in Romanian. Stimați colegi,
Colleagues, today we're not talking about pipelines or gas molecules. No, this debate is about something more important. We're talking about sickly dependence that ties certain member states to a very sick regime that exports terror and fear by the cubic meter. And like all dependencies, it started out very comfortably and ends in a leash. To be pragmatic doesn't mean to buy cheap, but rather not to buy vulnerability. Colleagues, strategic autonomy means that we should choose our own interdependencies or dependencies rather than have them imposed on us by geopolitical or historic contexts. Today, we choose to turn off the tap and stop the Russian gas. And we will not suffocate. On the contrary, we will breathe more easily. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Meyer.
Ja, danke schön.
Thank you, Madam President. The strategy that you're proposing here has been not very successful. It's going to remain so. And this is no real contribution to energy security in Europe. You can take that at face value. In fact, it's going to achieve the opposite. It's short-sighted and is destroying ourselves. EPP has been lobbying together with the Commission, and that means that we're damaging ourselves here in Europe. And that's something that's not going to be able to be undone. It also is short-circuiting the member states. Well, at least there's an American president who can see further and who's providing for peace, much far more far-sighted than the European nomenclature who've just been saber-rattling over the past years. Trump now has prepared a peace which will help everybody. And the whole European and global press in recent months have been making fun of Trump, but he is still pressing on. So this is scandalous for everybody, those who are proposing that we continue with war.
Please, Mr. Sieper, for 30 seconds.
Ja, Herr Kollege, vielen Dank.
Thank you for accepting the blue card. There's one thing I don't get. When you talk about Russia, the PFE stand firm in their defense of Putin. Can't you say something bad about Putin at least once? Can't you just say he is the one who's started the war? How come the PFE is always ready to defend Putin at every opportunity?
Well, Mr. Zieper, it's nothing to do with me defending Putin or Russia. I'm defending Europe and the member states, and I think that's what's the difference between me and you. It's not about Putin, it's about European interests that are not being represented.
Grazie, onorevole. Prego.
Thank you very much. Mr. Steers next.
Hvala predsjednice, poštovani povjereniče. Doista prekid uvoza ruskoga plina jest povijesna odluka. I vrijeme je da Europska unija u potpunosti prekine.
And now it's high time.
It was time for us to stop being dependent on the Russian fossil fuels, which continue to be used as a means of coercion. We have capacity for that. We have diversified supply sources. We have renewable sources. We have untapped capacities, geothermal energy, for instance. But what was necessary was to end the inflow of Russian gas, and that required political will, and we show today that we do have political will to end the importation. Now we are faced with the second step, and that is going to be the Commission's proposal to end the importation of Russian oil. And therefore I welcome the Commission statement whereby it undertakes at the beginning of the next year to present the legislative proposal to end the imports of Russian oil. That was the demand of this House. We know that there are member states who still continue to benefit from the exemption, but today we do have alternative. It is called the Adriatic pipeline, which already today, and Adriatic oil pipeline, and it can be alternative for all the Central European states which continue to import Russian fossil fuels. The rules have to be the same for everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Gualmini.
To speak in Italian, cari colleghi.
Colleagues, the ban on Russian gas imports is a truly historic moment. We're showing which side we're on. We're on the side of democracy. We're on the side of defending territorial integrity and sovereignty. We're on the side of international law. We can no longer be blackmailed while on the one hand we're condemning Putin's criminal aggression and on the other funding his war chest. But we need to look at prices too. It is good news that Parliament has been ahead of the Commission in terms of what we should do. We should be harmonising sanctions, incentivising renewables and diversification. All of this is good, and it's good to see the Commission also putting a stop to oil imports. It's enough amid some fake news about Europe not supporting Ukraine. Yes, we're supporting the Ukrainian resistance. We are stopping funding Putin, and we're in favour of peace and reconstruction.
Onorevole Scerba, prego.
Thank you, Mr. Scherber.
Pani Przewodnicząca, Pani...
President, Commissioner, this agreement that we reached between the Parliament and the Council concerning the withdrawal, the phasing out of the Russian gas imports is a historical moment. It's a breaking away from this dependency on Moscow's energy, which was a threat to our security and which financed the war. And I want to say very clearly that we've been watching also the fact that the gas sent from Russia was partly replaced by an LNG, which allowed for more financial means to still flow towards Russia. So it was time to face the reality. Thanks to the pressure, also from our part, we will move away from Russian gas imports 1 year earlier than we thought possible. But what is also important is the role for Olaf, for the European prosecutors and the European agency which cooperates with EMEA. What is also important, the future, the European funds. So what is also good is that we have an agreement concerning the Connecting Europe facility. Poland, my country, really wants the financing of NATO pipelines because we think the NATO infrastructure is crucial in our geopolitical situation.
Prego, onorevole Mavrides.
Thank you. Mr. Mavrides is next.
Phasing out the Russian natural gas imports is about our energy security and destiny. But the real issue is not just to end the Russian imports to EU, but to also close the loopholes through third countries, especially unreliable and autocratic regimes that can play for years a dirty game at the expense of our vital interests. For example, Turkey and Azerbaijan are both a striking example. And in fact, just recently, they stated publicly that they will not comply with any sanctions, just like they do for years. But this regulation is also about diversification of energy resources and pipelines. Some of them have already been mentioned, and I will mention one too. As of now, the only potential for domestic source of energy within EU is the Eastern Mediterranean. We had new discoveries, recently new agreements with the Republic of Cyprus at the center of all this. So, the conclusion is, on one hand, we had bad politics, and on the other hand, we had good politics and vision for Europe. And the choice, I think the real choice, is very clear.
Grazie, onorevole. Prego, onorevole.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cunha.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Commissioner. We need the European Commission here. We're very grateful for what you've done. We're very pleased to note the nature of what will be done now. This decision, which we've now achieved, means that we'll be able to keep our houses and businesses warm, but we'll also be able to put a stop to Russian gas imports that we were previously so dependent upon. This means we will increase our energy sovereignty, but it also means that we will be bringing to an end a period in which we were funding the Russian aggression in Ukraine. And we are more credible in our protection of Ukraine. Portugal supports this. Our Prime Minister, Luís Montenegro, said that we will remain firm and we will provide irreversible support for this decision. This is the future. This is the way we need to proceed. We need to have ever more strategic autonomy for Europe. Energy is a part of that, and that means we also need to go for renewables. We need more renewable sources, and we need to ensure that we're working EU-wide on energy interconnectors between member states too. We have a particularly vital link between the Iberian Peninsula and the rest of Europe so that renewables can truly spread across the continent.
Abbiamo terminato il dibattito.
Thank you very much. That concludes the debate. We move to the Catch the Eye. There are 9 people looking for the floor. I can take them all, but I would ask you to stick to your speaking time. To start, we have Mr. Kelly.
When Putin invaded Ukraine, he surprised many people in Europe, especially in the West. But we surprised him with the unity in which we responded, particularly in the sanctions being imposed so quickly, the welcoming of unfortunate Ukrainian refugees, but also the speed at which we are moving now to independency on Russia for oil and gas. But even if there was no Putin, we should be doing this anyway, because as Ursula von der Leyen pointed out in her State of the Union address, dependency means control, means higher prices. So the alternative is what we want. Develop our renewables. We'll be shortly discussing grids and the grids to go with them, so that we can have healthier lives, cheaper energy, and above all, independence. So today is a good day from that point of view, but the sooner we move now to the alternatives that are there, out there, the wind and the sun, but the grids to make them happen, then we'll have true independence and we can forget about Putin.
Thank you very much. Ms. Grappini is next.
President, Commissioner, colleagues, the biggest mistake that we can do as private or public management is to create dependencies. And this is what the European Union did. We were dependent on Russian gas and oil, and we must end it. Yes, it is a good decision, and I hope the regulation that we have in front of us today is voted. However, Commissioner, we must be very clear. We must think clearly how to create the energy market, how to create energy sources within the European Union. And you are well informed. In countries like mine, Romania, we pay 3 times higher prices for energy. We must be creative in order to avoid dependencies on whomever. We must be supportive towards citizens who cannot pay for these high energy prices. And we must learn from our mistakes. The European Union, the European Commission, the Council, which is not even here, should never set up projects that are dependent on one single state or one single area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Domator.
When talking about the ban of Eastern energy imports, the majority here are not willing to talk about one thing, the fact that for a great number of countries, all the alternatives are more expensive. The Draghi report clearly states that European companies already have to pay 5 times as much for the gas than their American counterparts. As a consequence, the European GDP growth is sluggish. Even the German industrial performance is declining. Don't you see the link between this and the sanction policy? The consequences are here to stay. For my country, according to IMF, a complete ban would mean an economic loss equivalent to 4% of our GDP. And you don't seem to care. All this issue means pure ideology for you, but dire consequences for millions. Even higher energy bills and ailing competitiveness, and you don't seem to care. Dear Grand Coalition over there, the pillars of the European economy are shaking, and voters know it well. Who are to blame for this? Their response will reach you. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole. Prego, onorevole.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tinkanen is next.
Arvoisa puhemies, vihdoin.
President, finally, Europe is in the process of stopping the purchase of Russian energy. But why only now? Russian gas and oil taps should have been turned off straight away as soon as Putin marched into Ukraine with his troops. While we are watching with a wry smile of what Trump might say today, what he might say tomorrow, Europe itself has been buying up Russian energy to the tune of tens and tens of billions of euros. Our inability to act for almost 4 years has led to the shedding of Ukrainian blood. The lack of action from Europe has hit Ukraine hard, but also it has weaponized Russia against ourselves. To those who are doubting, all that is sufficient for victory of evil is that for the forces of good decide not to act.
Turk.
Thank you, Ms. Turk.
Thank you, President. Let's be clear. Russian gas has always been too expensive. Russia has always used our dependency to threaten us, to pressure us, and to try to bend us to their will. But while it's been expensive for Europe, It is Ukraine that has truly paid the price for our obsession with Russian gas. And dear colleagues from the far right and the far left of this House, you always say you want peace. Well, now is your time to prove it. Because if you're serious about wanting peace, then you have to be serious about cutting off all funding flows to the one man that started it all, Putin. I sure am proud that I get to cast my vote, that we finally end our dependency on Russian gas, and that we take further steps towards a future in which Europe is powered by clean, cheap, and homegrown European energy. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole.
Thank you very much. Mr. Grazoulis.
Europa, tu esi pasaulio
My Europe, you are the capital of bureaucracy. For 4 years you've been taking decisions, saying you won't buy Russian gas, and now you're saying that you won't buy any more as of 2027. And as for oil, well, we haven't even said when we're getting out of oil. When are we going to stop buying fossil fuels from Russia, including oil? You just talk and don't do anything. What about the sanctions on Lukoil and Rosneft? You've been inviting to impose these sanctions, and Trump has proposed a peace plan, which you reject, but you haven't proposed your own plan to Putin. Putin isn't even in negotiations with you. So, look, where are you politically? You're nowhere. You don't even defend your own principles. All you do is talk.
Thank you. Mr. Zieper.
Dear people of Europe, I am proud of this parliament. I am proud because as an MEP I can rest knowing that I am not even needed for this. Yesterday we had a vote in the Intercommittee specifically about this file, and because I was sitting in the wrong committee room, I missed that vote. And once I realized that the voting lists of the colleagues next to me are way longer, I ran over and there was Bernd Lange, our Inter-Chair, telling me, no worries, Lucas, it was a landslide majority for this file, for phasing out Russian gas. Don't let yourself be blinded by the very right or the very left people of this parliament who, for some reason or another, either they claim to be patriots or they claim to be peacefully, I don't know. Don't let yourself be blinded by them. This is the right decision, this is the right way forward, and every liter of gas and oil that comes here is a bullet for Putin. We don't want this. Thank you, dear Parliament. Thank you, dear Rapporteur. Let's vote with yes. And this time, I will be there. Thank you.
Thank you. Prego, Mr. López Aguilar.
Thank you, Madam President. Comisario Jorgensen, claro que sí que hace...
Commissioner, yes, of course, it's high time to end Europe's toxic dependence on Russian gas. We've been depending on these cheap supplies for far too long, but we also have to note the agreement between Parliament and Council, whilst also recognising that we're increasingly dependent on the shadow fleet and on US oil and gas. Russia and the US agree on one thing. They want a weak Europe. So we have to do exactly the opposite, have a fair green transition to a decarbonised economy with clean green energy. And we have to do that with our own resources and with adequate financing, with joint debt. And we need to ensure that never again can we end up dependent, or even worse, blackmailed by others for our future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Papadakis.
The recent energy agreements between the U.S. and Greece, the vertical corridor, mean that this will cement the presence of American LNG in Greece. The strategy of the EU and our government is to abandon the much cheaper Russian natural gas in this competition with capitalist Russia. The Greek people pay a very high price for American LNG, but also for the liberalized energy market in Greece. So energy has become a traded commodity, and there are guaranteed profits for renewables conglomerates through European grants and taxes. At the same time, the people are paying a high price for the green transition, and for this international competition to control trade routes and hubs and ports. But no matter which energy route, pipeline or contract with American conglomerates, the people need to take ownership of their wealth.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Jørgensen, you have the floor.
Thank you all for this constructive debate. I want to especially answer some of the questions on whether or not we risk replacing one dependency with another dependency, because obviously there is some truth to that worry. We can just look at the numbers. We import for more than 370 billion euros every year fossils. This is not economically sustainable, to buy something and use it and then buy it again. The alternative, of course, renewable energy, where you invest in something that will then be the production of the energy that you need. That is indeed renewable. It's also clear that we need to diversify much more than we do now our imports, so that the strategy is really at least resting on two pillars. One, become more green as fast as possible, meaning more energy efficiency, more renewables. That is going fast in the right direction. We deployed 78 gigawatts of new renewables last year. This year we'll break that record again with probably closer to 89, and next year the ambition is to break that record once again. But two, the fossils that we still need, including gas, we need to not only be dependent on one source for that. So we're working hard on that, and I can also assure the members of this House, even though some of them face value doesn't look like agree with me on many things, I will still say that we are, of course, engaged from the Commission side in making sure that all countries, all member states, also the ones that are against this legislation, will be helped in the months to come, as best as we can, to make sure that this does not lead to prices increasing. Thank you.
Grazie, Commissario. Prego.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now, Ms. Vaidere as Rapporteur.
Dear Chair, dear colleagues, thank you really very much for this convincing and constructive debate. What we have heard today confirms clearly that vast majority in this House and in Europe fully supports ending Europe's dependency on Russian gas. Even more, you believe it's necessary, urgent and long overdue. To succeed in doing it, we must adopt this regulation and implement it properly. Member states must act now, invest in interconnections, secure new supply routes and continue reducing gas consumption, developing renewable energy. Phasing out of Russian gas is a good starting point. Europe must go further. After gas, we must end all remaining imports of Russian oil, as the Parliament requested. And we must also address our remaining dependence on Russian nuclear fuel and services. This is a strategic weakness that Europe can no longer ignore. So this regulation is the beginning of Europe's full and lasting energy independence. Also because every euro we stop sending to the Kremlin strengthens our security. And that's at the same time weakens Russia's ability to kill in Ukraine. Sanctions are very effective. They made the Russian economy weak, but this law is much more. I have to stress again, this regulation is not a sanction regime, even with progress towards peace in Ukraine, which I sincerely hope will come. Europe must stay away from Russian energy. Experience shows too well that dependence on Russian is dangerous. And it's not only because of the current regime in Kremlin, it's unfortunately about Russia. Europe must never repeat previous mistakes. Let me end by stressing that Europe must choose strength over dependence, security over short-term comfort, future where our energy decisions no longer put our values at risk. This is how Europe becomes stronger, safer, and truly independent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Mr. Niinisto for 2 minutes as a co-reporter.
Mr. President, thank you. The vast majority of this Parliament has been very impressive in its support for this trilogue outcome. And I think we have a clear vision. We want to go towards European energy independence, which is good for our competitiveness, good for our economy, good for our geopolitical security, and good for climate. And I would like to address a few concerns raised by some, which I think are futile. It is not patriotic to rely on Russian fossil fuel imports, and it is not cheap to rely on Russian fossil fuel imports. If we look at what Russia has done in the last 25 years, when Putin has been in power, there has been continuous manipulation of prices in the European markets. It's divide and rule, and we see what happened in the autumn of 2021. We were not prepared in that, and in many member states the consequences felt after the gas prices went up was due to being too dependent on Russian fossil fuels. But in 2021, in autumn, Russian Gazprom actually, they have been allowed to own a lot of the storages in Europe, like in Germany. They emptied those storages, and prices went up already half a year before the war, full-scale onslaught on Ukraine. So we knew that Putin is actually planning something huge, and he manipulated us in order to make Europe weak, that we would not support Ukraine. But on this, Putin was wrong. He couldn't manipulate us. We were in support of Ukraine, and we realized that we can never again allow them to have that power over us. Secondly, the prices of energy and electricity in Europe are lowest where there's the highest share of clean energy, renewable energy and domestic energy sources. Look at the Nordic energy market. I would very much like the German far right to also learn about how market economics works. Being reliant on single import from an unreliable source that manipulates the prices is not good for the economy. Now we are exiting that dependence, and we have to create energy independence where we are also producing vast majority of the energy production chain ourselves, bring added value to our economy, and it's good for our competitiveness. So that is the future of Europe. It's free of Russian extortion, and it's good for European citizens. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. With that, the debate is closed, and we will hold the vote tomorrow. Now we are moving to the next item on the agenda, the Commission statement, grids package and tackling rising energy prices through robust infrastructure. I will have to be strict with the time, taking into account that we have the Sakharov Prize and also the votes after. The first speaker is Commissioner Jørgensen for 5 minutes.
Thank you, President. Imagine making a puzzle, jigsaw puzzle, like I guess probably maybe even some of you will do that in your Christmas break. Now imagine making it without looking at the picture on the box. Or actually imagine that you make it with the other members of your family, so everybody tries to put the puzzle where they see it at the same time without looking at the box and without talking to each other and coordinating. That is almost the way it is with our energy system in Europe now. I exaggerate a little bit because we do try and coordinate, we do try and set the same targets and objectives, and we do have legislation that points us in the right direction, and many things are going well, and I think we have a good starting point in the sense that no other regions in the world are as well connected as we are. But really, if we look at it, we are today counting on things happening bottom up in an organic way. And if we want to really achieve our objectives, overcome the barriers and threats that we have to our energy system, that is not rational enough, it's not fast enough, it's not efficient enough. So we need more top-down planning. We need the European Union to be able to draw the map, show where the interconnections are needed, show what to do, when to do it, how to do it. Is this giving more power to the EU? In a way it is. Is it taking away more power from member states? No, because this is not a zero-sum game. By giving the European Union, the European Commission, these tools of planning and coordination, what we will actually do is that we will empower member states to make the decisions that for them will mean lower prices, easier decarbonization of their economies, and more security. So, better planning is a key part of this grids package. Second very important part is permitting. Today, unfortunately, the permitting procedures, both with regards to new production of renewable energy, but also with regards to grids, are way too slow. Quite often it takes 5 years, that's the average. Sometimes even a decade, sometimes even longer to get a permit. Now, obviously we know that we are in the middle of a fundamental transformation of the way we produce and consume and transmit energy in Europe. We are facing a massive threat from Putin in the East. We are living in turbulent times globally. Surely we cannot be satisfied that before we can even start making the new grids, start making the new production facilities for more renewables, we need to wait 5 or even 10 years. Friends, this will not stand. We need to move much faster. Of course, some of the rules, probably most of the rules, are there for a good reason. They're there to protect, for instance, our environment and our nature, and we cannot compromise on those objectives, obviously not. But we can do better and we can do faster. And this grid package shows how, and I look forward to discussing with you how we can make it as efficient as possible, whilst, of course, taking into consideration also the need to include local authorities, citizens in general. This package also puts obligations on member states to facilitate that citizens get a share in the projects. I come from a country where we've done that for decades, and it's been a success, because then all of a sudden, if you live next to a new solar farm or wind turbine farm, you'll see that this is to your direct advantage. Not only is it good for our climate and lower prices, it's also to your direct advantage. I think that will help. Finally, I will mention security. With this package, we introduce the concept that really we need to take security much more into consideration when making these big cross-border projects. This is, of course, also to be seen in connection with the rules that we will make on more and better cost-sharing methodologies. And as you all know, we have put forward a proposal in the next MFF to allocate 5 times as much money for safe energy as in the present one. This is necessary because we need to support the big infrastructure projects that crosses borders and therefore also, and that will be my final point, the 8 energy highways that we have put forward now is a first very important step in the direction I've just talked about. And if we manage to actually get these flagships up and running, becoming concrete and implemented, then that will also solve a lot of bottlenecks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The first speaker is Mr. Kelly, representing EPP Group.
Thank you very much to the Commissioner. You listened to us and you're after making some very good suggestions in this package.
An expanded and modernised electricity grid is non-negotiable if we want decarbonisation, electrification and lower energy costs for citizens and industry. The grid package makes it very clear that our electricity grid is the backbone of climate policy, energy security and competitiveness. But we should be very clear on one point. You cannot say you want these things and then oppose measures put forward to deliver the required infrastructure. Anyone who does is talking out of both sides of their mouth. According to the International Energy Agency, a fully decarbonised electricity system by 2035 is a precondition for reaching net zero by 2050. 2035 is just 10 years away. Yet across Europe, major grid projects still take, as the Commissioner said, anything from 10 to 12 years from planning to delivery. If you oppose measures to accelerate permitting for grids and renewables, you are simply not supporting a decarbonised power system. You are actually making it impossible. That needs to be said loud and clear. These proposals are designed to cut timelines, remove some of the appeals and procedures that add years without adding any real environmental value. Ultimately, the delivery of a decarbonised electricity system will do far more for nature and habitats than any legal appeal to a pylon or overhead line ever could. We cannot afford delays. Delays mean higher consumer bills, more renewable power curtailed and wasted, investment gone elsewhere, and a prolonged dependence on imported fossil fuels. I also welcome the proposed revision of 10E and the move towards more coordinated EU-level grid planning. I know every one of us will hear from our national TSOs, and those concerns which I will mention deserve to be taken seriously. But if we want a genuine energy union, we must get away from fragmented grid planning across the EU. Cross-border coordination is essential if we want a most efficient and resilient system.
Thank you, Agus. Continue in your good work.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Nika for 1 minute and a half, representing S&D Group.
Thank you. Commissioner Jorgensen, in Romania, 2 million citizens are unable to properly heat their homes because the price of energy is much too high. So they either have to give up buying medicines, food, or choose to heat up their home. This is something that threatens their health and their way of life. You visited Bucharest recently. Thank you for doing so. I'm glad you came to Romania to see yourself a country that has the highest price of energy in the EU. And you noted that there is a reason for this, the lack of interconnection between Hungary and Austria. The flow of energy, cheap energy, that should come to Romania when we need it is seriously distorted. And you came up with this grid proposal, for which I have to congratulate you. You say that if countries do not act properly and distort the EU market, you will step in. You have my support and the support of the EU Parliament. I believe that this should not be left up to member states, even if there's 2 of them. A few days ago, we adopted the REMIT directive. There are 444 cases where the EU legislation was violated and various EU companies manipulated prices. 444 cases, 200 billion euros, roughly. Do you know how many cases were prosecuted by Acer so far? Only 9. Only 9 were investigated. This is unacceptable, Commissioner. If it's tough, it should be tough for all of us. We shouldn't allow some people to speculate and to cheat and lie and make a profit. Thank you very much, Commissioner Jorgensen.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Gyurk for 1 minute and a half, representing Patriots Group.
Thank you very much, President. The use of energy is more and more, and therefore competition is going to depend on price, which is going to be cheaper, and it has to be transported as well in a reliable grid. And we are in a drawback situation because we have to pay 2 or 3 times more than our competition. And the Commission has admitted that the grid is very important. We welcome the digitalization of the system and the speeding up proposals. However, we are concerned about the fact that when it comes to national authorities, there are other powers which are going to be reduced, and we know that we have to pay a very important price for that. When it comes to direct impact, the effectiveness is not that important. And this is quite spectacular, especially in the summer, because we need more pipelines and we need more solutions, especially at the borderline with Austria and Hungary, so that the investments could be done. It is our common goal to have cheaper energy, and therefore we patriots are ready to work for all these objectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Kutilek for 1 minute, representing ECR Group.
Vážený pane předsedající, vážený pane komisaři.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner. I'd like to start with this grids package saying what is positive. That's reducing the permitting process because we're talking about critical infrastructure. But there's still things here where I have questions. We need to strengthen cross-border planning, but we have to strike a balance because every state had its own specific conditions and needs for its networks. Also, we're talking about reducing energy prices still. But are we not looking at this through rose-tinted spectacles? We're talking about getting rid of congestion, but also looking at the investments that need to be made. And all of these costs will have to be passed on through the regulated component for customers. Also, we focus too much on the sources and too little about the networks, and I think we need to look at this the other way around. But renewables, linking them across Europe is not going to produce a miraculous solution. We need baseload, core and buffer services.
For 1 minute, representing Renew Group.
Thank you, President. Dear Commissioner. We
are facing an incredible opportunity. We have the opportunity to use sun from Spain to turn on the lights in Austria, for wind from across the continent to power our homes, affordable electricity for everybody. And Commissioner, I have to thank you. With this grids package, you have taken a very important step in this direction of pooling energy sources across Europe. But I'm a little bit bothered by one thing. No sooner do you say European, than some member states have a sort of nationalistic knee-jerk reaction and then turn against this European grid. But precisely it's this national patchwork that is weakening Europe and making our energy expensive, and precisely having an internal electricity market that can help us reduce costs and increase efficiency. So we have to rise to our responsibilities. We have to seize this opportunity for all Europeans and for the sake of their electricity bills. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Bloss for 1 minute and a half, representing Greens Group.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner. Ladies and gentlemen, just imagine Europe could save 40 billion euros a year. 40 billion euros by having better planning and grids. That's not a dream. This is really what we're talking about here. Today we're talking about European grid planning, which may sound technical, but behind it is the key for our energy future. Without grids package, we won't have climate neutral industries, we won't have rechargeable cars, etc. This is the key to the energy transition, providing green resources from Greece to Germany, makes us independent of Trump, Putin, autocrats, and I expect that the member states don't get bogged down in the details, but look at the bigger picture. 40 billion a year, that's more than the Hamburg or Schleswig-Holstein and Bremen budgets together per year. And we've still got better things to come, because when you build new turbines, wind turbines, you create more money for people, for music associations, etc., more for the community. What we're discussing today is just the start. It's clear that Europe needs a harmonized network for renewable energy up to 100%. Thank you very much for this proposal. I'm looking forward to our cooperation on this.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Tamburrano for 1 minute and a half, representing the Left Group.
Ladies and gentlemen, we know that to date a great deal has been done on decarbonisation, but not enough has been done to strengthen and adapt our electricity grids, interconnectors between states and continents, national transmission networks, as well as distribution points. Each one of these three extenders has a fundamental task to ensure security and stability of supply in an electrified and decarbonised energy model. We need to ensure our resilience and strategic autonomy in a turbulent geopolitical context that exposes us to economic threats and increasing risks of cyber attacks, as well as potential physical attacks as well. The 10E package is a good starting point to adapt our electricity grids to these new realities, to improve the effectiveness of investment, speeding up connections as well, both at a macro level as a principle of solidarity, cooperation and energy exchange between member states. We will also be able to compensate for intermittency of some of the renewable sources, but also trickling down to the micro-territorial level as well, where networks should be at the service of local communities, small generation and distributed accumulation, and able to operate by design autonomously in the event of disruptive events of any kind, be it climatic, hybrid attacks or conventional attacks. This is one of the best forms of European defence and resilience that we can actually achieve. Thank you very much, colleagues. We're going to be working on this package. We look forward to working on it too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Sipineski for 1 minute and a half, representing ECN Group.
Thank you so much. Finally, we are talking about serious issues, and it's true, we have to modernize the grids. The problem is it costs a lot of money, and I don't really understand where to take this money from, because everything in Europe needs a lot of money. And the second problem is, why are we talking about it now and not when you started to design all your energy and climate goals? It was the time to think about grids, and now the grids cannot function with this green energy that is being used. That should be designed and thought of earlier, and we shouldn't be thinking about it now, because the world wants more and more energy, the demand is growing, and with the development of, for example, artificial intelligence, it will grow even more. So the world is increasing its energy, the US, China, India, but but they are not blinded by this green ideology. If we could change the ideology into megawatts, we would have the cheapest electricity ever. But it is not possible because, unfortunately, even solar energy is not free. Everything costs. And it also costs the grid operators. And with the current energy prices, our industry has no chance. Everybody's leaving us. All the industries are leaving Europe. And of course, grids will cost us billions, but it will not bring prices down. The prices will go down if we leave ideology and start thinking of prices.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mrs. Wechsler for 1 minute and a half.
Sehr geehrter Herr Präsident.
Mr. President, Commissioner, colleagues, grids package is a promise to people and to businesses in Europe that they will have a stable, affordable and secure source of energy, because this decides whether families can reliably heat their homes, if businesses can make business plans, and also whether industry remains in Europe. Many citizens today are battling with huge energy bills and also long waiting times for connection and congested grids, and that is why this package is so important. We'll be able to speed up permitting, have clearer priority criteria for connections, and also the possibility for clean sources of energy to get to where they are needed, to people, to cities, to local communities, and to our SMEs and our industry. We are strengthening cooperation between member states because energy knows no borders, and we are going to ensure that projects that can really supply the energy we need can get connected more quickly. The grids package is a package in favour of industry in Europe. It is a package in favour of households. It is a package for prosperity. And it's an important step in the direction of a European energy internal market. And that is a good thing.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Chahim for 1 minute and a half.
Thank you, President. Thank you for finishing on time, because most colleagues don't do that. De energierekening.
We have to reduce energy bills. That's what our businesses and people at home are asking us to do. In winter, we Dutch don't just dream of the Spanish sun, but also of low energy bills. Sun from Spain, wind from the Netherlands, hydropower from Sweden. Together we can split our energy requirements, but we can only do that with a truly European energy network. Because at the moment, Netherlands is at a standstill. Hundreds of thousands of homes are at risk of not being built, not only because of nitrogen, but also because of a congested power net. Sometimes it can take 10 years to get a project off the ground, 6 years of which is lost just to granting the permit. This can and must be done faster. Network operators and public authorities must have sufficient capacity. Modernising our energy grid requires major investments, but that bill shouldn't be footed by our citizens only. We have to have a fair sharing of the costs with national borders and between countries as well. With joint European projects, we can create economies of scale and reduce costs. These large-scale projects also need support. Accelerating does not mean abolishing civic participation, ignoring local residents. This leads to a loss of support and therefore delays. Accelerating, I would say, means prioritising in a smart fashion. Focus more on wind and solar parks, more charging stations. A truly European energy grid will help us and will reduce costs. This is how we can benefit from the Spanish sun, even when, in a week's time, the whole of the Netherlands is going to be plugging in their festive gourmet set.
The next speaker is Mrs. Piera for 1 minute.
La Commission européenne entend désormais.
So now the European Commission is going to sell a dream that it can't follow through on, lowering electricity prices if member states agree to vote through the grids package. But European citizens are not going to be fooled. The Commission only has one aim with this text: centralise the planning system completely, take power away from member states, organise all procurement centrally from Brussels. This isn't going to bring electricity prices down. Actually, this text will lead to €1.2 billion funding of this pointless interconnection through the use of renewables and ultimately It is the consumer already on their knees from rising energy prices who are going to have to fund this sine diem. And we've seen a 50% increase already in prices in Europe. These dogmatic, senseless choices which have been made in the context of the Green Deal are now leading to a situation where people prefer to shiver in the cold rather than foot these enormous bills. Is this really a protection against price rises? In fact, no. This is just taking us back into a Kafkaesque nightmare.
The speaker is Mrs. Zaleska for 1 minute.
Panie Przewodniczący, Panie...
Madam President, Mr. Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, a few facts from my side. 40% of grids in the EU are more than 40 years old. Experts calculate that in order to modernize the grids and to build a new one, we need more than 1 trillion euros over a dozen of years or so. And what do we see in the multi-annual financial framework? We see a slight increase, but only to 30 billion euros. Not to mention that we see renewables mentioned nowhere. The heads of the major energy grids in Europe say there is a crisis related to connecting renewable energy sources. So this is the top of what we could have achieved. So we need to plan this, and we should not cheat people that this is going to bring energy prices down. Member states need to have their sovereignty in decision making. We will not agree to have an alleged consent in that respect. No. It needs to be controlled for the sake of energy security of each EU member state and for the sake of all the Europeans. Thank you.
Mr. Grudler for 1 minute.
Commissioner, dear colleagues, I welcome the presentation of this grids package. We called for it in our own initiative report drafted by a Renew rapporteur. We said it was urgent to take action. In some member states, more than 6,000 projects are waiting to be connected to the grid. Renewable energy projects stalled, investments frozen because of lack of infrastructure. Speeding up permitting is vital, but that alone is not enough. We need to roll out on a massive scale storage facilities, batteries, clean hydrogen, and also solutions to cater for flexibility. We need to adopt a systemic vision, genuine coordination between TSOs rather than a vision imposed from on high without taking into account the situation on the ground. We need to stabilize the network, reduce congestion and manage costs. But let's be clear, without massively speeding up electrification of energy consumption, all of these efforts will have been in vain. We need an electrification plan now.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mrs. Paulus for 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner, for this very valid proposal, and I was very content to hear that nearly all the colleagues, let's say the pro-democratic, pro-European colleagues, are content with this proposal and are seeing the need of strengthening our grids, of course getting faster in implementing our common electricity union. And why is this so important? We have seen in the recent years that some member states have excelled in blocking interconnectors, in blocking unifying our energy union due to domestic reasons, due to wanting to protect their domestic producers. And therefore, I think the Commission has now taken the right step to move away from this nationalistic thinking, because we're all in this together. We need to build on our common grid. We have seen how important that was during the energy crisis, when some member states could help out other member states which had difficulties in producing enough electricity for their citizens. We should build on this experience, and we should, of course, look at the whole grid and not with a national view, and therefore I very much welcome this proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mrs. Messour for 1 minute and a half.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. We recognise the importance of electricity grids. They have an importance beyond the technical importance. They're also vital to the energy transition. They're absolutely vital for all of our systems to ensure that we have reliable, affordable and safe electricity. Without high-performance, robust grids, we won't be able to achieve decarbonisation. A shortage of electricity, inadequate grids, intermittent production, all of this leads to a dependence on fossil fuel imports from third countries. But we have a climate, social, sovereignty priority of achieving independence. Our grid manager, RTE in France, has said that there's a €100 billion need to modernise a pretty decrepit, ancient network. We need to ensure that we have decent working conditions too for those who are toiling day in, day out to ensure that we have a robust service. So, colleagues, we need to make progress in this area, which means turning our back on the previous market-dependent approach. We need proper long-term planning to develop electricity grids and to achieve the energy transition, which is so vital to the future of Europe.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Mazurek for 1 minute and a half.
Máme v Európe najdrahšie ceny.
The prices of our energies in Europe are the most expensive throughout. Is 5 times the prices compared to the US. And let's not compare ourselves to Russia or China. This Commission, it's not enough for the Commission. The people are struggling to pay for their invoices. Our citizens have the highest prices for fuel, for energy, and the Commission is completely failing in this energy war with Russia, with China. But this is still not enough, and the Commission needs to launch also economic war against the US, because all of you here believe that you still have the patent for truth, that you are the only one in the world who can think rationally, and when the money stops, we will just print new money, we will take new debt, and you're really excellent at this. You will launch new emission taxes to make the lives of our citizens even more expensive so that you can spend their money more and more. This is the only solution we're hearing on and on. More solar panels, more wind turbines at the same time when China is opening new coal plant every month. What are you trying to do? What planet are you trying to save? Do you really think Europe will be self-sufficient when you introduce this absurd solution that have failed time and time again? Just look at the young people. What is their future? What is their perspective? How are they finance their housing? And you telling them to take even more brunt? The Commission is the main enemy of Europe. We need to stop the Commission and go back to common sense.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mrs. Lokos for 1 minute and a half.
Commissioner, President, dear colleagues, the European Commission's grid package reinforces what experts and participants in the market have been echoing for years. The green transition and energy security cannot exist without updated and well-connected electricity grids. It's especially important for Hungary, which is in a strategic position between Central Europe and East and Southern Europe. Hungary is reliant on electricity imports, so updating electricity grids could improve our energy security. While our electricity needs increase because new factories are being built, the government has not treated modernizing the grids as a priority. So the renewable projects are just waiting for the infrastructure to be created, and prices have been skyrocketing. This is irresponsible. The Commission's package is right to put emphasis on accelerating authorization and permitting. We need the new grids to be able to provide affordable and safe energy both for households and for our companies. And Hungary needs a government which is able to create this future. Thank you.
The next speaker is Mr. Maniadis for 1 minute.
Dear Chairman, dear Commissioner, dear colleagues, this packet of the European Commission on networks is a decisive step towards an interconnected European grid. We have 5 times more investments, and in coordination with the Connecting Europe facility, on which I am the S&D rapporteur, can bring down energy prices in areas like the southeastern Europe that have a lot of grid problems, especially in Greece, where we have double the European average of energy poor people. Connection with Cyprus and the fact that the Great Sea Interconnector has been put into the priority projects demonstrates how important this piece of legislation is. And then we have the Trans-Balkan vertical corridor. So I would like to call upon the European governments to rise to the occasion and help us make all of these projects a reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mrs. Nagyová for 1 minute.
Vážený pane komisaři, vážení kolegové, tento balíček nepřichází jenom s týdenním zpožděním, ale s křížkem po funuse. Toto měla být páteř Fit for 55 a ne dodatečná záplata.
So this is part of the Fit for 55, but this came at far too late a stage. We need some sort of economic design that will work for the 21st century, but the infrastructure is actually dated from the 70s, the last century. We need faster investment and investment security. It's included in the package, and I'd be grateful if we could get approval for this tomorrow, but we'd still have to wait for years for important components such as transformers. And Europe has basically fallen asleep at the wheel. What does the Commission want? They're trying to take over the role of the national bodies responsible.
Work on the package and try our best for Europeans. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mrs. Vivaldini for 1 minute.
Gentile Presidente.
President, colleagues, today the Commission is presenting a plan on the grids package, which can be seen in the context of the Green Deal. But it falls far short of meeting the current needs. We need to get beyond short-termism. We need energy targets which are ambitious and realistic, citizen-centred, taking account of the cost to business and dealing with the infrastructure which is necessary to provide support. We have to tackle energy prices. Consumers are paying twice to 3 times as much as Americans or Chinese. And this has devastating effects on our businesses and industry. They're suffering. They can't create jobs. It's stifling innovation. So there are practical positive points here, but we need a more pragmatic approach, particularly to permitting. We have a step in the right direction here, but it's insufficient. We need a greater role for private sector investment. We need a paradigm shift, less ideology, more realism and courage.
The next speaker is Mrs. van den Berg for 1 minute.
Voorzitter. Mr. President, at the moment, Europe is like a housing block, but without any cooperation between the inhabitants. Everybody wants heating and light, but they each want to decide on how they do this. You might have people on the first floor who want solar power. On the ground floor, people want a nuclear reactor, and some people are putting wind farms in the garden. So instead of pooling forces, everybody is out for themselves. And what is the result of this? At one point, energy is super cheap. The next minute, the bill is through the roof. And then the next minute, there's a blackout. The reality should be different. I call on member states to see the European Union as the housing management. Let's work together to get a lower electricity bill, proper management, and make us independent from the rest of the world and strengthen our union. Let's get to work on that.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Papas for 1 minute.
President, dear colleagues, for a long time now we've been talking about bringing down electricity prices and we hear about project strategies and energy highways, but things haven't changed for millions of European citizens. With stagnant wages, they pay exorbitant prices for energy. Young people, young workers with low-paying jobs cannot wait around forever for energy projects to be implemented. We need to control energy prices. Otherwise, new infrastructure will bring a further increase of energy prices for the average person. So we need to alleviate the burden for lower strata. Otherwise, people will continue to pay the price for this inertia.
La siguiente oradora.
Thank you. Ms. Del Castillo for 1 minute 30. President, Commissioner, if you want a competitive economy with AI, cloud computing, data storage and so on, if you want all of that, you need really high capacity grids. If you also want to bring down energy prices for citizens and companies, then you need to take account of the broader picture. We're seeing exponential growth in demand for rickety old grids that need renewal and modernisation. There's also grid congestion costing up to €26 billion over the next 5 years. And on top of all that, we have a 15% interconnection target for 2030. But in Spain, we currently have 3.6%. So it's a good proposal from the Commission. We need to simplify permitting. We need to look at security of supply right from the design design stage. We have to move towards digitalisation. We have to take account of this in the MFF too. We need that bigger picture. It's greater than the sum of its parts. We need EU-wide action. We need a single market-based approach. That is the way to do it, which will also allow priority projects such as the 8 energy superhighways to be developed. And in the case of the Iberian Peninsula, this will be the Euro-Iberian Highway through the Pyrenees. And we need urgent action there. We need to ensure the interconnections. We've got the legislation now coming to Parliament, so it is incumbent upon us now to act as quick as possible. Thanks.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Toback for 1 minute.
Thank you, President, ladies and gentlemen. The Commission is trying to do us a favour here with this package. They know where a better future might lie. Strengthening our grids means that we are giving our citizens the possibility of using clean energy and networking our energy rather than turning off wind turbines. But we're still looking at energy prices which are 3 times higher than other areas of the world. So we're better linking these areas, integrating this better, and that's going to help electricity prices in the member states. But in member states, there are some where the price is 3 times more than elsewhere. It's not just about transformers. It's about keeping the lights on tomorrow, about keeping cars moving, keeping factories working in an economy that shouldn't have to try and get its hands on fossil fuels to keep going. It's about linking different parts of Europe, defending citizens' interests, a way in which we could otherwise no longer defend Europe. And I know that many people in this Parliament have understood that's something that we couldn't do if this weren't in place.
The catch the eye, and the next speaker is Mr. Van Dijk for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioner. We've all paid the price of the lack of a genuine energy union. Citizens and businesses experience very painfully the lack of competitiveness. We need a stronger and better interconnected network in Europe, and this deserves our full support. But we also want to call on you to respect technology neutrality when it comes to generation power, and don't be ideological about this. Of course, renewables are an important part of our energy mix, but it's not the only solution. We should talk about the overall systemic costs of every technology and the effect of that on electricity bills. We need to massively invest in security of supply. I agree, but massive investment in capital-intensive projects that we don't have transparency about the bill is something we can't go along with. We've invested a lot of time and energy in the past on this, but we need to be realistic and cost-efficient in our planning in future.
The next speaker is Mr. Grotuis for 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair, the Commissioner. This week, Europe votes to stop buying Russian gas. No more weaponization of energy dependencies. Good. But in doing so, we're behaving like a goldfish. A goldfish swims around its bowl, forgets where it's been, and it starts all over again. In our European fishbowl, we are rightfully electrifying our continent. But 80% of residential grid batteries in Europe are Chinese. Chinese are dumping wind turbines on our market. 80% of Europe's new solar PV inverters are Chinese. And so is their software. Service availability for Europe can be manipulated from Beijing fast at their time of choosing, and it can be done at a massive scale, from dependency on one autocrat to another. So I have to ask the Commissioner, are we really breaking our dependency this week, or are we just changing suppliers? Europe cannot afford to keep swimming in circles. Ban Chinese vendors from our critical infrastructure. Build European, and also invest in a nuclear European grid backbone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Berendsen for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are 14,000 major consumers who are waiting for connection, but they could be producing sustainably, but they can't get connected. The permitting procedures are contributing to these massive waiting times. They can take up to 8 years, and yet we have enough affordable green energy available if only we could connect it. This is crucial. We think that this proposal is a good step in the right direction, more European planning, more investment, and better distribution of costs for projects that several member states will profit from. In the CDA, we are also happy that finally our appeal has been heard to exempt people from these nitrogen requirements in sustainable construction projects. I mean, you can't just hold up a whole building project just because one of the machines involved is producing nitrogen. And we need to also invest in hydrogen infrastructure, CO2 structure, and other future-proof projects.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Gori for 1 minute.
Presidente, Commissario.
President, Commissioner, colleagues. Strengthening energy infrastructure is a major way of ensuring European security and competitiveness and reducing energy prices. So we need to look at the obstacles in our way: low levels of interconnection, dependence on fossil fuels, insufficient investment. Those are the problems. Permitting is a major part of the problem. Member States are not doing enough. Italy got a rap on the knuckles for not fully implementing the 2023 Renewables Directive. Nonetheless, the Italian government is further restricting the range of renewables plants that can be recognised and used. We need to restart permitting with silence and planned consent. We need to ensure that the EU can play a useful role, but it's basically up to member states to achieve implementation, because otherwise the legislation will remain unimplemented.
Mrs. Marshall, for 1 minute.
Je veux rendre ici hommage.
I'd like to pay tribute here to bakers, butchers, artisans, restaurant owners, hoteliers, farmers, to all of those for whom the electricity bill sometimes becomes complete anguish, often because of decisions taken here in the Parliament. Our companies need energy that's affordable to be able to remain viable and competitive against China or the US, where the prices are 3 to 4 times lower. The EU's insistence on injecting more and more intermittent renewable energy into the electricity grid is economic suicide. In France, the third multi-annual energy programme, which stems from European bonds, is likely to increase costs by 30 to 40%. Our country will actually have to invest not less than 150 billion euros to adapt its network to the proliferation of wind turbines and solar panels. It's crazy. This stubbornness is all the more absurd because our country, France, thanks to its nuclear fleet, produces today more than it consumes. Once again, on this topic, you can count on us to be the voice of businesses and business leaders whose difficulties and anxieties seem so difficult to be heard by this Commission.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mrs. Fries for 1 minute.
Om lidt så sætter vi os ved et veldækket julebord.
Pretty soon now, we're going to be celebrating Christmas, giving each other gifts. We'll be celebrating light and happiness, but not everybody can afford much light. Or heat. Many families fear the arrival of the energy bill at the end of the month. This is having a huge impact on household budgets. We need to achieve a true energy revolution to ensure that clean energy gets where it's needed. And our antiquated grid is not going to do the job to ensure that green energy can make it to the families who need it. And these families are paying €30 million per year as a consequence of the inadequate infrastructure. What we need to achieve is a situation where nobody's cold in December and nobody feels left behind by the EU. Merry Christmas.
Speaker is Mr. Geyer for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioner, colleagues. The first thing I want to raise is prices. Recently, I had an opportunity to talk to those who run local energy generators, who say that the municipal grid in a few years' time will need 1/3 more electricity than they do now because of all these plans. But they say they don't know how they're going to extend the grid sufficiently to manage this, and also they don't know what the charges should be, how much private households and businesses will have to pay, and of course the orders will already have to be made for the supplies to come through in 10 years' time. So we have to bear in mind that if we are extending grids, we must never forget storage. These proposals are a possibility that the Commission should finally end, this compartmentalization of energy policy?
The next speaker is Mrs. Timgren for 1 minute.
Thank you, President. Energy prices that are too high depends on electricity that has been mismanaged. Electricity is important, but the system becomes unstable. If you have to transport stuff and it lacks consistency, we need to have core supply all around the clock, not just when the sun shines or the wind blows, but instead the EU is subsidising reliance on this sort of energy that's intermittent, and your average person on the street is not getting that energy. So ideology is something we need to drop when looking at energy. And this opposition to nuclear power is still there since the 1980s. We need to go back to technological neutrality. Let's back what works, including nuclear power. Let's have lower prices. That won't come from more regulation. It will come from more electricity, more competition, and reliable production. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. McNamara for 1 minute.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Jorgensen, I wish to commend you for the very balanced approach that you've taken to this in your opening presentation. I heard you say two things of what I would consider considerable import. One, we need to continue to protect our environment while we advance these grids, which are absolutely necessary. I think nobody doubts that. And the second thing is there has to be a share in the ownership for local communities. Neither approach, unfortunately, is being adopted in Ireland. There's an environmental subterfuge going on where these huge developers submit an environmental impact assessment report, which is often cut and pasted from another part of the country, very obviously cut and pasted because it mentions places from another part of the country in that. And there's nobody in our planning system who can interrogate that report because we don't hire environmental scientists, we don't hire ecologists. So we take these huge corporations at their word. They say that they've taken the environment into account, but of course they take profits into account fundamentally because that's what they're set up to do. And these companies are emanations of the state. It's the ESB and it's Cuilcha that are doing this. And of course, as regards local ownership, there simply is none. They sponsor some football jerseys or some other patronising claptrap for the communities, and that is the extent of the local buy-in. It is fostering huge resentment because they are facilitated in proceeding with huge developments in areas where members of the community can't do anything because of environmental designations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Gonsalves for 1 minute.
President, Commissioner Jorgensen, there are over 2 million people living in energy poverty in Portugal. In Bulgaria, it's 20% of the population. In Germany, it's 1 in 10 families. These are people who are facing a terrible dilemma this winter. They're going to stay warm, or they're going to save enough money to pay for everything else that they need. So the EU needs to take action here. We need a flexible and affordable electricity grid. We urgently need to modernise the grid. There are economies of scale that you can bring in the private sector too. You can move towards renewables and you can improve the permitting schemes. In this way, we'll be less dependent on the imports of fossil fuels, and this is an excellent proposal from the Commission. It's a good start. You can count on the Parliament's support to do this for the sake of citizens and businesses in Europe.
Speaker is Mr. Tinkunen for 1 minute.
Mr. President, let me offer an example from Finland when discussing the grids package and energy infrastructure. We have not been waiting for EU-level strategies. We have been investing heavily in our own capacity, including nuclear power. Today, we are very close to full annual self-sufficiency when it comes to electricity. Our main grid transmission reliability rate is almost 100%. This has not happened because Madame Ursula designed a grand plan, but because we took responsibility. This is the point. Strong national investments work. Finland doesn't want to pay other countries' electricity bills. What the EU needs is member states with their own critical infrastructure funded by themselves, not centralised communist plans. Thank you.
Hello, sorry, Mr. Tinkunen, we have a blue card. Okay, he's not accepting it. Okay, we are moving to the catch the eye. We have 4 catch the eye, then we are going to take it all. The first one is for Mr. Siodras for 1 minute.
Thank you. The interconnection is not a technical issue. We cannot talk about a single market without an energy market, especially when we have such great fluctuations in prices between countries. And it is citizens and enterprise that pay these high prices. Now, this package for networks is a very good opportunity both for Greece and other southeastern European countries because the energy costs are very high and it's a big burden both for citizens and companies. We need to act fast and efficiently, and the Commission needs to support the Member States. It needs to mobilise both private investments and public funds, better strategy, speeding up with all procedures when it comes to licensing. This package for networks is not just a technical detail. It's an investment in energy safety and social cohesion between Member States. So it needs to be our central political priority. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Andriukaitis for 1 minute.
Thank you, President. Mr. Commissioner, colleagues, today we are talking about the issue which we start discussing in 2010 when Jacques Delors and the President of the European Parliament, Jerzy Buzek, announced the new European Energy Community. And now, in almost 2026, we still see how difficult it is to actually implement the interconnections to connect our grids so that we've got a common energy market in the European Union and achieve the most affordable energy prices, not just for the Finns or the other ones who've got cheaper energy, but for every European, and especially those who suffer because of the lack of energy supply, because they can't use the potential of the neighbouring countries. This grids package is very timely, and today it is extremely important to say that the European Commission has to come up with a very concrete plan with the timelines when the national energy strategies have to be implemented so that we are interconnected in the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Grasulis for 1 minute.
Honourable members, I would like to talk about Lithuania. In Lithuania, the previous government privatized a monopoly, Ignitis, electricity company, and did that secretly. And they wanted profit, and they pay a lot in dividends, and the private company invests into third countries, into Latin America. At the same time, they do not invest enough into Lithuanian grids, and Lithuanian citizens cannot access renewable sources of energy because there is no power, there is no capacity. The current government, the Social Democrats, don't put enough efforts in order to buy out the shares, and this monopoly has a board, the representatives of which are representatives of private capital. And I addressed the Commissioner indicating the problems in Lithuania, but I never received the answer. I do hope I will receive it.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Sipel. When you asked for the floor, it was closed to catch the eye, but exceptionally, we are going to take it.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Maybe the button was hindered by the energy grid.
Dear people of Europe, I listened with interest to my colleague Mr. Tinkinen praising the Finnish electricity grid, and rightly so. Finland should be proud of it. But to turn national excellence into an argument for national solutions is deeply short-sighted. First, we have a single economic area. We share markets, supply chains and prices. We have Schengen, where borders no longer define economic realities. Second, energy grids are critical infrastructure in all of Europe. Russian attacks, physical, cyber and hybrid, have shown us one thing very clearly. Critical infrastructure is European in its vulnerability. Third, Europe's weakness globally has never come from cooperation. It has come from national solo efforts. An attack on one grid, a problem in one grid, a solution in one grid will not bring Europe forward. European energy sovereignty will not be built by 27 separate solutions. It will be built by one interconnected, resilient European grid. Finland grid is strong, but European grid will only be strong if we act together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And the last speaker is Mr. Aftias for 1 minute.
Commissioner, we often talk together and we talk about housing, but today what we are discussing is a social good which is of the utmost importance. And you know that my country has to pay double the price of electricity because...
Three of every 8 buses in Greece run on electricity. We have to start to work on transport and working for the pensioners and the farmers of my country. They need cheaper energy.
And that will also deal with the high cost of electricity. So as soon as possible and as much as possible. And we feel that this move on your part will be important, not just for Europe, but also specifically for my own home country, which is Greece.
Thank you very much. Now, Commissioner Jorgensen, you have the floor.
Energy prices in Europe are way too high. It hurts the competitiveness of our industry. They, on average, pay 2 to 3 times more for their energy than, for instance, their competitors in the US or China. But it also hurts our citizens. On an average year in Europe, unfortunately, I have to say, 47 million people, almost 50 million people, are struggling to heat their homes, cannot adequately heat their homes. Imagine that in our wealthy, prosperous part of the world, almost 50 million people have to choose basically between food and warmth. This will not stand. So we need to lower our prices. Now, if there were one silver bullet that we could just use, of course we would use it. We all know there's not. But that's not the same as saying that we cannot do things that will help. Of course we can. And one of the most important things we can do is to become more connected. ASA has documented this quite well. If we were not as connected as we are, if we were just 27 different countries and 27 different energy systems, we would pay 34 billion more for our energy a year than we do. So yes, bills are too high, but they would be even higher if we did not have the European Union. Now, the potential to save much more in the future is big. We can save a lot by having interconnectors that connect our countries, especially where there's a lack of connections. We can avoid curtailment, the places where there's congestions today, and we can avoid wasting energy because sometimes in a system with a lot of renewables, there's also a lot of need to transport the electrons. Now, if we don't do anything, some estimates show that in 2040 we will waste energy equal to half of our entire consumption of electricity in 2023. Imagine that. That's how much we would waste. So, we do need to act. There is no other way. And this is why this grids package is, I think, probably the most important thing we will do in the energy sector in Europe in the years to come. We need to combine all of these things that I've spoken about earlier and that you have commented upon in your speeches today, of course, with a plan for heating and cooling, electrification strategy, implementation of many of the things that we've adopted also in the previous mandate. But if we do these things, then we will, in the future, be able to address the three main challenges that we have in the energy sector. I've already spoken on the prices, but it's also clear that if we want to be energy independent, if we want our security of energy supply to be much better than it is today, and especially in the wake of us getting rid of our dependency of Russian gas, then this is also necessary. And finally, decarbonization is not possible if we do not manage to solve these problems. Now, one of the things that many of you have also spoken to is the necessity for us to speed up the permitting processes. And if you look at what we propose, it is unprecedented. And it will mean that we will dramatically lower the time frames, / how many months or even years it takes. We're doing it with a very targeted approach, meaning that it will not lead to fundamentally a change in our objectives of protecting our nature and environment or listening to public concerns. Of course not. That is still very important. But we will do it in a different way because there are trade-offs. And I think that if we actually adopt the things put forward on the table here, then we are very well situated to actually delivering on those objectives. So, friends, thank you so much for a very, very good debate. I look forward to continuing it and also making legislation with you later in the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. With this, the debate is closed and the sitting is suspended. And we will continue at 12 with the award of the Sakharov Prize. Thank you very much.